At the end of the 19th century, several unions, including the Knights of Labor, disbanded. From the ashes of the Knights of Labor, many new unions were formed. One of these upstart unions, the National Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, was founded on November 28, 1891 in St. Louis. On the top floor of the Stoley's Dance Hall, 10 men representing 286 members met to discuss the changes needed in the electrical industry.
I think Henry Miller and these linemen that sat in a dance hall thought first and foremost about how they would instill more safety practices, safety programs to prevent the death rate of about 50% of the members that practiced the trade at that time, and I'm talking about linemen. So the IBEW wasn't founded about primarily great working conditions, great wages, great medical plans, great pensions, great apprenticeship programs. As a matter of fact, apprenticeship programs weren't part of our history for our first 50 years. It was founded on safety.
There were lots of different unions in the late 19th century, early 20th century. Many of them were quite radical, like the Knights of Labor, which wanted to get beyond the wage system entirely, the IWW, which wanted to do away with capitalism entirely. But the FFL really believed in organizing people who could stay organized. They believed first in organizing skilled workers. They weren't against organizing unskilled workers, but they believed you needed a bedrock of skilled workers in the building trades, in the mines, in printing, various other skilled trades, or else people would not stay with the unions. They wouldn't be able to afford the dues. They wouldn't be able to survive a strike. And also they believed skilled workers had a real sense of property in their skill, in their craft, and they weren't going to leave that. They weren't going to go to another job, another occupation very easily.
The early organizers had a very travel-oriented life. They would go from job to job, riding the rails, sometimes without paying a fare, sometimes being thrown off. But the idea was they were going to different jobs to get people interested in the union, to get people signed up for the union. Many of them did it just to build up the union, because without the union they didn't have anything.
In 1891 there were no safety laws in place, no OSHA, and so it's safety number one, and then to start improving the wages as well. Because our forefathers started from nothing and built the IBEW to what it is today, and so we need to reflect back on how they addressed the challenges of those times to get where we are today.
The earliest IBEW local in LA, Local 61, was founded 2 years later in 1893. At the time, Los Angeles was the 57th largest city in the United States, and the population was a mere 50,391. While San Francisco was urban, industrialized, and highly unionized. At the time, Los Angeles was small and rural, was a hotbed of anti-union activity.
Los Angeles was seen as the open shop city, especially compared to San Francisco, where unionism was stronger probably any place else in the country. And that was partly because it was marketed that way by the Chamber of Commerce and also by the only really important newspaper in the city at the time, the LA Times, which was edited by a guy named Harrison Gray Otis, who was a businessman and had a lot of money invested in Mexico, and he saw himself as a crusader against unions. He thought unions hampered the growth of the economy. He thought LA would grow much more quickly without unions than if it had unions. As LA grew, more workers came in. They were unhappy with their working conditions, and they did start to join unions.
The founding principles of the union, the IBEW, really was to organize all the people in the industry. Linemen, people who were wiring houses, the telephone industry is just getting started. So really the whole idea was to organize. They used to say organize thoroughly. They wanted to thoroughly organize the industry, get everyone in it.
The first local union for inside wiremen electricians in Los Angeles was IBEW Local 116, organized in September of 1900, which immediately won the 8-hour day for its members and a substantial pay increase. Then 1 year later, in February 1901, without striking, the inside wiremen of Local 116 signed a year's contract with the Electrical Exchange with a specified wage of $3 per 8-hour day. 1 year later, in 1902, Local 116 was back at the bargaining table asking for the enforcement of the 8-hour day establishment of minimum wages, time and one-half for overtime, and double time for Sundays and holidays. The demands were not met, and there was a strike of all electricians in the city on July 17, 1902. The strike was defeated in a week by the employers, but was a significant step toward winning working conditions that are still in the Inside Wiremen's Agreement 114 years later. One of the largest employers of the time was the Pacific Electric Railway. The railway also took a very extreme view toward its workers forming unions. In 1902, when faced with an organizing drive, the owner, Henry Huntington, fired all of the employees that joined the fledgling union. Then he had an LAPD officer posted on each streetcar to keep organizers from approaching them.
In the fall of 1910, the Los Angeles Times building was bombed, killing 21 people. This was blamed at first on the unions by Harrison Gray Otis, and unions denied having any part of it. They said it was a gas explosion, it was an accident. But in fact, it was the work of two brothers, the McNamara brothers, who were members of the Structural Iron Workers Union, and so their lawyer, the famous radical lawyer Clarence Darrow, decided to save their lives, he would change their plea from not guilty to guilty. And because, in fact, they were guilty, and he knew that. And he, of course, had the okay of the McNamara brothers to do this. Well, this was a terrible shock, certainly, to unionists in California, and the unions in LA didn't really recover until the 1930s.
Early strikes in Los Angeles were broken with regularity by any combination of employer tactics, including firing, blackballing workers, beatings, intimidation, and even boycotting businesses that recognized unions. What would be one of the largest oil strikes in the world happened in Signal Hill, California, in the Long Beach field. On June 23rd at 9:30 p.m., the Alamitos No. 1 erupted with so great a gas pressure that oil gushed 114 feet into the air. By 2015, the Long Beach field produced over 945 million barrels of oil. All of that oil required infrastructure, a deep water port, refineries, oil fields, trucks, houses for the workers, and schools for their children. Just 30 miles to the north, another industry more closely associated with LA was launched. The movie industry was centered in Hollywood, which was a well-established and highly profitable industry by 1941. With endless sunshine and wartime jobs, people from every corner of the world came to Los Angeles to make their way. IBEW Local 40 had several thousand workers who operated the lights on movie sets at the time.
The main periods of growth of the IBEW, I would say, began first with the period leading up to and throughout the First World War. Not only was there a great demand for their skill, but the government was willing to entertain the idea that people had a right to organize. It wasn't a legal right, but the government sort of said, okay. So that helped a lot. But then you find after the war, that power is gone.
The Wagner Act passed in the midst of the Depression, helping millions of workers join unions. Although workers had been already organizing in unions for more than 100 years, the Wagner Act now made it clear that workers could legally join together and form unions.
The next period of growth are the years leading up to the Second World War, when you've got an incredible demand for all kinds of electrical work, especially in shipyards. A growing category because there'd been practically no work at all in the 1920s, and so it really takes off again. You've got electrical workers needed to build up military camps. You've got electrical workers during the war who are working on projects like the Manhattan Project. So they're doing all sorts of incredible work, and there's lots of work for everybody. Now they've got the Wagner Act, so organizing is legal. You've got the War Labor Board. You've got all sorts of agencies that are trying to make things work.
By the time IBEW Local 11 was founded in 1942, there had been 27 different locals in Los Angeles County. Many of these locals were chartered and went defunct within a few years. It became clear that there needed to be one union for electrical construction in Los Angeles County. Local B11 was a merger of 6 local unions with a combined membership of 2,136. the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers chartered Local B11 on January 1st, 1942.
In Los Angeles, we had numerous locals, and those locals were based in cities. And those cities had their own area that they would form. That's how we got used to it. But that's before a freeway system, and in some cases before we even had cars. Those locals all came together and said, let's just be one local now. We don't have to be all these locals in all these different areas. We are the greater Los Angeles. But that's after we looked at what would make us stronger, how we would come together, and how we would move forward from that point on.
At the time of the merger, the City of Angels was bursting at the seams. Now with a population of 1.5 million, LA was now the 5th biggest city in the United States.
In World War II, because the government wanted to make sure people wouldn't go on strike during the war, hampering the war effort, also encouraged workers to join unions under a thing called the Maintenance of Membership Act, where if you worked in a wartime industry, and most of America was working in wartime industries, then it was assumed you'd be a union member if the union was already organized in that particular factory, in that particular workplace, unless you opted out of it. And most workers didn't want to opt out of it because the union was doing pretty well by then. So the New Deal really was a watershed in American history, and especially American labor history, because it really got unions into the mainstream of American life, made them legitimate institutions in a way they had not quite been before.
The Long Beach Naval Shipyards created thousands of wartime jobs, and Local 11 quickly grew to 15,000 members. Most of these were temporary wartime jobs, and the membership shrank to a post-war level of 5,800 members in 1946. At the time of the merger, inside wiremen made $1 an hour and worked 8.5 hours a day. After the dust settled from the merger, a dynamic business manager by the name of George Ellicott took the reins of Local 11. Years later, when Ellicott retired, IBEW 11 was the 3rd largest local union of electricians in the IBEW. Known for his even temperament, George was able to find solutions that worked for both employers and workers in the trade, and would set the tone for a positive relationship with employers that continues to this day. With labor relations now stable, the next few decades saw nothing but growth for the city and county, with a large percentage of members building the San Fernando and San Gabriel Valley's new sprawling suburbs. Residential work was plentiful, as was industrial and commercial work.
There's this sense that the Wagner Act was too favorable to unions. Legislators get together and we end up with the Taft-Hartley Act, which was developed out of an idea to some extent that labor has corrupt powers.
The 1950s saw construction continue to boom, and the bargaining between IBEW 11 and the Los Angeles chapter of NECA, the Contractors Association, became more stable than in the pre-war years. In 1950, 81% of the workers in the construction industry were members of a union. America now had an emerging middle class, and electricians in Los Angeles were now a part of it. Built in 1928, Los Angeles City Hall was the tallest building in the city until 1968. Height restrictions were eventually lifted in the city in 1964, and most of the city's tallest buildings were built from the mid-1960s until the late 1990s. The Los Angeles skyline is instantly recognizable, and we are proud to point at the buildings that we personally wired to anyone that will listen.
The work picture in the 50s and 60s in Local 11 was a post-war environment. There was a lot of demand. The refineries, obviously the housing market was a boom market. They were plowing under all the orange fields, starting to build housing tracts.
In the 70s, employers chose, instead of doing residential or other small market, which takes a lot of overhead to do all those different types of work, they could actually do 1 high-rise or 2 high-rises, and they can focus in more, and thought that they can actually make more money doing so. A lot of the IBEW manpower didn't want to do residential also, and it became an issue.
While the overall size of the local was relatively the same, the industry got much larger. This led to a decrease in market share and power of the union. This slip in union market share and stagnation of wages led to a very poisonous atmosphere with NECA and IBEW 11.
Some of the issues that led up to the strike in 1981 was the necessity that the contractors felt to be competitive in an upcoming market to create a new classification, utility technicians. That was a break in the history of the IBEW because up to that time you only had two classifications, primarily a journeyman and an apprentice. And so from the union standpoint and from the rank and file, that was a very difficult pill to swallow. From management standpoint, to be competitive and to continue to flourish and take advantage of the upcoming work picture, they saw it as a necessity to keep this work on the union side of the fence.
The non-union contractors in the LA market were starting to gain market share and starting to take jobs that were traditionally jobs that we had with our union contract.
Training is a very important part of the organizational culture of IBEW. The ETI is nationally renowned for its development of solar, advanced lighting controls, intelligent transportation systems, and total building integration technologies.
We're a skill-based trade, and we have to constantly instruct, mentor, and hand down those safe work practices in installing these electrical systems and working on these electrical systems.
Today, more than 3,400 journeymen take continuing education classes annually, and the apprenticeship programs have 1,300 students enrolled. That makes IBEW 11, Los Angeles NECA chapter, the largest electrical apprenticeship program in the United States. This commitment to the cutting-edge technology is shown in the new Net Zero Energy Plus project at the ETI. When finished, all of the energy used by the building will be produced on-site and will store enough energy to operate without power from the grid if there's a blackout. It has hosted former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and 2 AFL-CIO presidents. In addition, governors, mayors, county supervisors, members of Congress, state office holders, and school board members can be seen regularly in activities at the facility. Building trades unions have often been ignored in the history books.
In the 1800s, you had a lot of unions that started and stopped. The IBEW and the building trades has survived all that time. One of the main reasons that we have lasted as long as we are is we think ahead. Where is our industry going? But we're going to be there. We're always going to be there into that fight. We're going to continue to grow, and we will be around for the next millennium.
The unions of the building trades represent 3 million workers today.
There's always been a struggle going on, whether or not you take a hardline stand against the contractors or you support the contractors. You know, you can't be a good union man if you're not a good electrician. Not only protect your work, but protect the contractor. There can't be one without the other, the contractor and the union. That's why the IBEW and NECA have been so successful over the years, because they realized that one can't be the dominant over the other one. They have to work together in a mutual partnership for the mutual benefit of both.
We have a goal of trying to recruit 50% of all persons we bring into our apprenticeship program, which is running about 1,200 strong, one of the largest ones in the country.
You learn to get up early in the morning. They teach you discipline, working together as a team, you know, sticking up for each other, watching each other's back.
In the 1960s and 70s, some of the anti-labor feeling comes from people who were not let into unions. Many African Americans and minorities had a real sense that unions weren't for them, and so they resented it.
I think it's always been important for the building trades, and particularly Local 11, to lead the building trades, that we have a diverse membership, that it represents all the communities that we live in and we're a part of. And we can't expect to do the work in these communities if we're not representative of these communities. And let's just be honest, diversity is good for us.
The most powerful movement for inclusion in the IBEW has been the Electrical Workers Minority Caucus. Formed in 1974 to push for more diversity in the rank and file and in the leadership, the EWMC has been a guiding force in IBEW 11. Women have been underrepresented in construction. Local 11 has been instrumental in leading the drive for more women entering the trade.
Electricians have such a component of education requirements to do the work they have to do. Being more educated does make you more broad-minded and agreeable to changes. And most men, I think if you ask them now, a lot of them will say, yeah, women can do it and do it fine. So there's a lot of acceptance.
How can we outreach to people in the local communities so that they could have an access to our program? So we said we're going to try to work with different community groups to create supportive services for people who need GEDs and who need algebra. And then we're going to help them with the entrance exam. So we're going to have them come in, we're going to give them a study guide, and we're going to go over all of the pieces of our entrance exam to make sure that people have a clear understanding and a chance.
We're fortunate, I say we are, because I'm a Californian. We live in the melting pot of this country where people come from everywhere. They always have found their way to California. We embrace all people. We invite them into our ranks. We make them feel included. We're part of something much bigger than ourselves, and Local 11 has led the way in that effort.
Marvin started off by saying, well, I've got a different opinion and a different attitude, but we do have to embrace, we do have to make changes, but I'm going to bring it back to the membership and you'll be involved in those changes. And he really embraced educating the membership about what needed to be done and the importance of increasing market share. And that led to actually moving Local 11 from a situation in the late 70s where we controlled easily 50 to 60, maybe even some say as high as 70% market share, to where in the early 90s, by 1995, when Marvin came in, as low possibly as 20% of the market share. And to my knowledge today in 2016, we're back up over 50% of the market share, a phenomenal turnaround.
There were less than 100 members in Local 116 in LA 1900. By 1950, in Local 11, we reached our peak, and by the 1990s, we were in really tough shape. We work with organizations like Lane, Scope Agenda, Homeboy Industries, LA County Federation of Labor, the Building Trades, Working Californians, and CREED. By having strong allies, we've been able to get over $100 billion worth of work under PLAs in LA County. Our local union's a political machine. The way we look at it, you're either at the table or you're on the menu. This is one of the reasons the Engineers and Architects Association, a union with a 100-year history and 4,600 members affiliated with Local 11, there was a very good fit. They recently negotiated an excellent contract with the City of Los Angeles, and we're proud to call them our sisters and brothers. We just organized 400 workers at the Quincashario facility in Palmdale, California, working with our Jobs to Move America coalition, and that's just the start.
In many ways, there's something very progressive about the West Coast locals. When you think of how anti-labor Los Angeles was at the turn of the 20th century, it's amazing that they grew into one of the most progressive locals in the international.
And we have challenges today like we've had since our beginning, but there's a lot of opportunities today in organizing and growing our brotherhood and also being part of our communities.
Local 11 is a rich culture of organizing, embracing all peoples, all workers, people from every background.
How do we continue to diversify the local, continue to make this local open to the communities, continue to make a huge commitment to veterans and other underserved communities within this great Los Angeles County? How do we weave this together? How do we build a class of leaders that can lead Local 11? And I don't just say Local 11 in this local, can lead this country.
When every man must fight, when he believes United we stand, divided we fall. Together we are what we can't be alone. We came to this country, we made it a home. This man so humble, this man so brave, a legend to many, he fought to his grave. Saved family and friends from the hardship and horror in a land of depression. He gave hope for tomorrow. Say Johnny B. Boy, this one's for you. The strength of man and the courage of a few. To what do we owe this man whose fight was for the masses? He gave his life. Say, hey Johnny boy, the battle call. United we stand, divided we fall. Together we are what we can't be alone. We came to this country, we made it our home. Friends of the locals who dabble in crime. He give you a job, he give you his time. He wasn't a crook, but he couldn't be con. John knew the difference between right and wrong. Say Johnny B. boy, you live no longer. Others forgotten, your memory stronger. Let's drink to the causes in your life. Your family, your friends, the union, your wife. Say, hey Johnny boy, the battle call. United we stand, divided we fall. Together we are what we can't be alone. We came to this country, you made it home. Say, hey Johnny boy, the battle call. United we stand, divided we fall. Together we are what we can't be alone. We came to this country, you made it home. And the boys on the docks needed John for sure. When they came to this country, he opened the door. He said, man, I'll tell ya, they don't like our kind. No, it starts with your fist, it must end with your mind. Say, hey Johnny boy, the battle call. United we stand, divided we fall. Together we are what we can't be alone. We came to this country, you made